What's up, everybody? One Fun Guy podcast in the studio. Going to be going live with Kelly in a few minutes. I'm going to get him on. It's going to be awesome, guys. We're going to talk about heavy metal and hard rock music. It's going to be fantastic. So if you guys are on, hop on with us. We're going to be going live here in just a couple minutes. It's going to be awesome. Got a great show coming up tonight, guys. Like I said, we're going to be talking about some industrial music, bands and stuff like that. So it's actually going to be a really, really cool podcast. So I hope you guys are ready for some fun and excitement. It's going to be pretty badass. We're going to have a good time. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of cool stuff. So if you guys are on, just give me a few minutes here. I'm going to invite Kelly on in just a couple seconds here. I always get started a tad bit early just to get the ball rolling and to get everything happening. So with that being said, we are going to have a super, super fun podcast tonight. So we're on. Kim, what's happening? What's going on? We're going to see who else is hopping on here. Give me a second. I'm going to share this out, see if I can invite him on. Go from there. I'm going to see who is around and who is in the house tonight. We're going to have a good time, guys. It's going to be fun. We got a good show coming up. We're going to get everything going on here. We're going to see who we can invite. If you're on, say hi. If you like the show, that's awesome. Just comment on in. We're going to be interactive tonight, guys. So it is going to be a good show. If you like what you see, give us some hearts, give us some likes, and we will go from there. While Kelly's getting on, I have a new addition to the collection. This just came in the mail.
Whoa!
The re-edited original version of Vulgar Display of Power.
Nice. What's
This
new
is
about it?
probably, if I had to take a guess at an album, it would be tied between this and Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction. I could listen to these two albums 1,000 times in a row. So that just came. So I'm super, super stoked about that. But we got a good show for you tonight. We are going to have a lot of fun. If you like what you see, guys, just send us some hearts. We don't need gifts, guys. I save your money for people who need it. We just like to hang out and have a good time and talk about music. So we appreciate you all for being here. It is an interactive show. So if you guys want to get involved in the conversation, send us a comment and we'll reply back. We pay attention. Hades, what's going on, my friend? So yeah, we're just going to hang out tonight. We kind of switched topics. We're going to talk about industrial music and why we think it is not caught on to the mainstream like it should, right? Like, I'm a huge industrial music fan, right? Kelly, I know you are definitely a big fan. Why do you think that is? We'll just start off with the basics. Like, why do you think it's such a weird, like, not weird, but like an underrated genre of music when it really should be more prevalent?
Yeah, I mean the weirdest thing for me, right, is that it had a steady climb. Like there were I'll go way back, like the synth pop thing
Sure.
that was, and obviously people try to take a genre and make it harder and harder and more extreme or whatever. And so in the mid '80s there were bands like Fetus and Skinny Puppy started out in the '80s and
Mhm.
KMFDMs and the Front 242s and those guys. And then, people with guitars discovered that stuff. So Godflesh and so on. So it had a good steady climb. And then Ministry and Nine Inch Nails came onto the scene and things exploded, right? So there was almost like an oversaturation that happened. I feel like, it was going really hard with a lot of similar type bands. And it got so incredibly huge that I think that it imploded under its own weight a little bit. Like it got a little bit too popular too fast
Sure.
once those fantastic bands happened.
Yeah.
So then it just sort of disappeared.
Charlie, what's up? Stacy, what's up?
Yeah, Hades and Just to See the Girl and folks, thanks for all the likes. But yeah, so what I think what happened
Shannon,
was
what's up? Bloody, what's up? Thank you guys for hopping on. We appreciate it.
Very much so. But yeah, so I mean, it got mainstream. It became really huge. It was all over the news with Marilyn Manson and all that stuff, right? Or Fear Factory being a huge band and all that stuff. But I just think that it was too much of the same too quickly, and it couldn't evolve
Taro, what's up?
Shannon. So yeah, so then I think it just imploded. A few obviously kept going and have been very successful, like Ramstein, and so on. But it's very far, and I just feel like there's so much left on the table for industrial. Um, it disappeared without a trace, almost type of thing, with a few exceptions. So I don't really know why, and especially now, right when it's so easy to have electronics
Right.
included, when everybody can get free drum machines and free everything, right? And sit down and make this stuff. It's just amazing to me that industrial metal as a genre has more or less disappeared. Um, it's a bit of a mystery.
Yeah.
Um,
So,
yeah,
I don't think it was for lack of album sales, right? Because Nine Inch Nails did very well for themselves. Ministry did fairly well for themselves. Rammstein did extremely well for themselves, right? So I don't think it's that. I think it's hard when you are an industrial metal band to get billed, right? Who do you tour with? Nine Inch Nails, if you've looked at their history of touring, they don't really tour with like metal bands, and they kind of tour with like hard rock and punk bands. And then they kind of did their own thing when they went on tour with Queens of the Stone Age, where I saw them, right? And it's just weird because it's like I don't think it's like it's unless you're like Marilyn Manson or Rammstein, right? Like Marilyn Manson can be billed with heavy metal bands, hard rock bands. He kind of plays eclectically. Rammstein is kind of that same way, right? Rammstein can go on tour with Metallica or Megadeth, just as they could go on tour with In Flames or any one of the other bands, in a different genre. But I think a lot of them just get pegged in that middle ground where they have a hard time touring with a certain style of band, because if you're not used to that kind of music and you're there to see like a hard rock or a punk show and an industrial band comes on, I think a lot of people get turned off by it. They're like, what is this, right? Like a lot of people, unfortunately, don't approach metal with a very open mind, right? They kind of like accept the fact that there's other bands playing, but if you're there to see the band that you want to see, a lot of people don't give opening acts their time, right? They pretty much just basically turn into, come on, hurry up, get your set done, get your set done, get your set done, so I can see the other band, right? So I mentioned, you had asked on one of your reels, like name some industrial bands, right? And it was very weird to see the answers that were given, right? Because obviously some people said Godflesh, but nobody said Septic Flesh, right? Which Septic Flesh is kind of the rare oddity where they can play metal, industrial, synth, opera, right? They kind of mix it all together, but like they got left off, right? So nobody said that. A lot of bands that were there that were mentioned were what we would call the subgenres of music, right? So like Fear Factory, right? Fear Factory went on tour with Pantera, they went on tour with Korn, they've gone on tour with like big acts, but they've never toured with like an industrial metal band, right? You wouldn't see Nine Inch Nails play with Fear Factory when it would make sense that they would go on tour together, right? That they're kind of in that mode. So I think a lot of it is just in terms of what is actually like going on in the music genre, and then tours, right? Because if you built a metal show, you're not going to have a lot of industrial bands on that bill. And there are no industrial metal that I'm aware of tours that happen, right? Where you could play, right? And so you have bands, I think, that just get lost in the wayside when people book tours. That no one, I mean, unless you're Ministry or Nine Inch Nails, where you could play on a Riot Fest or you could play on like, but for the most part, they won't get billed on a big show, right? Like they just don't. They never have.
yeah. No, I think you're onto something there too. That it's what I consider sort of the true industrial, right? It's in such a middle ground. Thanks, folks, for the gifts and the hearts. Really
Yeah, we
appreciate it.
appreciate it, guys. Thank you for
And
all the
if you
love
like
and
this,
support.
if you like what we're doing too, hit the share button too, and tell your friends to
Yeah,
join.
that'd be awesome. Invite
That'd be
invite
cool.
everybody. We're here for the party.
Um, but I think you're right that the categorization is a problem, right? Is it metal or is it electronic? And it's
Ellie,
something.
what's up? Thanks for hopping on.
Hey, Ali. Um, so I think it might be just difficult to classify. I think you're right. Like
Yeah, yeah,
you know, uh, maybe it's too electronic for the metal fans, and maybe it's too metal for the electronic fans. Like if you're Nine Inch Nails, you can headline and you can pick your own supporting acts, right?
yeah,
Even
and
though, I mean, obviously Trent being a huge Bowie fan, he toured with
sure,
Bowie, because
right.
who wouldn't, that sort of thing. If you would open for your favorite band, even though you could totally have it reversed if you wanted to,
Yeah,
you can do it.
and so and I
But that speaks a little bit
yeah,
to the.
but
I think
it's
you're onto
weird though,
something.
right? Because like you have some electronic DJs, right? What's his name? Z Trip comes to mind, right? Like Z Trip mixes industrial and metal in basically a DJ set, right? He'll overdub Zeppelin and Pantera and Linkin Park, and he puts them in. I know the other guy too. I can't think of his name. The Polish guy. He's like a world famous DJ. Um, uh,
Oh.
he incorporates a lot of like metal into his DJ set, right? Like he'll intro Metallica or he'll intro AC/DC or like so they bring the rock music right into the mainstream, right? Like Ellie, what's up? That is I've
Oh,
never seen that before. Thank
fireworks!
you so much.
Heart
That was
fireworks.
awesome, right? So yeah, so we just don't get like I think that like when you get um bands that consistently stick to like a certain pattern and then they try to like switch it up a little bit. I think a lot of the fans consider that like selling out, right? And it's not. It's just uniqueness, right? And when you're a fixated industrial band, right? You have the ability to incorporate all different types of instruments in your music, right? Including a keyboard, including turntables, including a laptop, right? Drum machines, like you mentioned earlier, different guitar and bass tracks, right? You can tune down your guitars, right? You don't have to make them seem, you can make them, not so deep and chunky, right? But it seems to get lost by the wayside, and it's sad because like a lot of these bands are super talented, right? Very very talented,
Mhm.
but they just kind of get caught up in a genre that just gets overlooked now. And you know, the heyday of industrial music, right, is definitely late '80s, early '90s, mid '90s to early 2000s, right? Once the 2010s hit, it kind of just fell apart, right? It was just kind of, the bands that had established themselves earlier, right? That we had forementioned kind of made it through. But a lot of the other bands that were in that genre that were very, very good, right? And just kind of fell to the wayside, right? Um, you know, and I give credit to, and I know we mentioned them before a lot, but Sepultura, right? They did a lot with the industrial scene. They
Yeah,
invited
nail
Therapy to
bomb.
tour with them. They used to bring a lot of industrial bands on tour with them when
Yeah,
they played a lot. They brought that to the forefront. That I think
yeah.
they actually were one of the bands. I think they found Fear Factory, right? Wasn't it that they were very in the early
I
stages? Took them on tour.
that might be true, but I know that Max had the nail bomb uh,
Yeah, yeah, that was his other
project as
band.
well. So
Yeah,
that was industrial too.
yeah. So
Um,
he did Nail Bomb. He did a couple stuff with Therapy, and he did stuff with not Grip Inc. but the other one, Misery and Company. He did a lot with them. He kind of brought them up to that kind of level. They actually did uh, it was Sepultura and Biohazard did a mix album with Therapy and another like industrial band, and they kind of took each other's music and kind of sounded. So they were like the forefront of it, right? Like Sepultura had a lot to do with the industrial scene, especially in metal.
yeah, no, that's true. Seems like we've got a gifting battle going on between Shannon and Ali here.
Right? Yeah, everyone's gifting, right?
Thank you
I'm
so much.
not
Oh,
complaining,
just a
but
silly
you
girl is
guys don't
jumping in
you
too.
guys don't have to spend your money on us, guys. Really, just like the show and heart it. Like keep the money. We appreciate it, but we would rather have you guys gift people who actually are out there trying to make money on TikTok. We're just here, right? Like we're just kind of doing our own thing, right? We appreciate the likes. That's our big thing, right? If we can get the like numbers up, that's big for us. Gifts, we appreciate them, guys, but you don't have to spend your hard-earned money on us. We're just here to talk about music and life and give a little entertainment. We appreciate it. Don't get me wrong. We love the support. So don't think of it that way. But we're really just, we're not really in it for the money right now. We're more in it for the likes and the shares and the viewership. So, but we appreciate everything, guys. Thank you so much. We love you guys.
Whoa, thank you. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, to be frank, also the gifts do help with viewership. That goes
They
into
do.
the
They
TikTok
get us to the
algorithm, so they
FYP.
push it out to more people.
Yeah, they
There's a
get
lot of
it.
people gifting, so there is
Yeah,
that.
they get it to the
But
FYP, but
but that is, so the appreciation there is to be able to
sure.
promote this and
Right.
like this and have it reach more people. So super appreciate that. It's not for the money, it's for the fame. Let's
Yeah.
call it that. We are seeking
Esther, thank you
fame and
too. We
glory
appreciate it.
is what we're seeking.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
But yeah,
So,
right. But
uh,
that's the thing though, right? So like, we talk about music and we're just two guys that give our opinions, right? We're not experts by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, we know a lot about music, both of us, but I mean, it's just our opinion on things, right? So if you don't like what we're saying about certain bands or you don't like, it's not that we don't dislike it, but like we obviously have our favorites in certain genres and bands that we like. So if you're a huge fan of industrial music and you want to hop in the conversation, please by all means feel free to do it.
yes.
We don't we're just giving our opinion about it. And again, we are huge fans of like heavy metal and hard rock music, and that goes for all of the genres, right? Like we don't just particularly like we want to see hard rock and metal succeed in the world, right? We want to compete with the Taylor Swifts and the Backstreet Boys and the NSYNCs, right? Like we have capability to do it. Metallica can go to toe, I think, with just about anybody right on the planet. I would say Guns N' Roses has a good case for that. If ACDC starts touring again like they're supposed to next year, ACDC is going to bring it down. They'll have 65, 70,000 people at big festivals, and they're going to do, I think 50 gigs or 60 gigs. ACDC is going to hit $1 billion next year. They're going to be a big band, right?
Wow.
And so they're up there. So they can compete with the big guns of music, right? And I'm not talking about just hard rock and metal. Like ACDC is going to bring it to the world next year, and people are going to see them because it might be the last time we do, right? Brian Johnson, Malcolm unfortunately had passed away, right? Angus is still going strong. I think they got a new drummer now. I think they were having issues with their prior one, but I mean, like ACDC is going to bring it when they come to town. They will attract a large crowd.
Yeah, no, it's true. Esther, also thank you for gifting and liking and all that stuff. Really
Yeah,
appreciate
Shannon,
it.
Esther, Ellie, Kim, you guys are awesome.
Ellie, yeah, great. But I did want to say something that Hades said earlier um, about the industrial thing, and I think that um, part of the part of the difficulty was that also that I think that a peak was reached for the main artists. So Nine Inch Nails did Downward Spiral, which is arguably a perfect album in its own genre.
Mhm.
Um, Really difficult to top that, right? But the thing is that it was different all the time. And then as soon as it started to get samey, like every Ministry album started to sound like Ministry's previous three albums or whatever, right? And Nine Inch Nails even started to sound samey. That was like it was not a surprise anymore, so interest was lost a little bit. And I think that's the risk there too, in terms of what is it that is appealing to this audience? Is
Yeah,
it that it is forever
right.
changing and pushing, or is it that they want a certain thing? And I think that
Yeah.
most of those bands were being cautious. That's
That
good.
is awesome. I'm gonna have to
Because,
screenshot these from now on.
I think that was a good look on you, by the
Yeah,
way.
right.
I think you have to go. I think you have to go shopping.
I think so, right?
But I think that because these bands were so successful, they were trying to cash in on that success. So they were
Sure.
like, okay, let's keep doing what it is that's
Right.
been successful for us, right? When the audience might have been more like, oh, I can't wait to hear what you're doing next, and there was
Right.
not so much of that, and that's how it collapsed.
Now,
A little bit.
again, too, I know we use Nine Inch Nails as kind of like the standard in the industrial music, right? But Trent Reznor has done so much with other genres of music, right? He's a phenomenal songwriter. He's a phenomenal musician, right? In general, he writes scores for movies. He's done soundtracks. He's very eclectic. So I think that's why Nine Inch Nails gets that like push to the top, just because of Trent Reznor, right? And you know, you kind of look at the uniqueness of like Filter, right? Like Filter came out of Nine Inch Nails, right? So you had Richard Patrick basically come out and say, "Listen, I'm going to do my own thing," right? And it just so happened that "Hey Man, Nice Shot" came out right around the time Kurt Cobain had his Nice Shot, right? So like it got a lot of publicity, right? So
More ways
you
than
know,
one.
and so right, and so I think that like when you have these bands, right, that can kind of like make it, right, and you get it and everything like that, right, and you know, again, that's just kind of like the thing, right, because you have Richard Patrick basically. Look at that. Now that's a good look. You know,
You
but
get the
you have,
badass,
you know, right,
and I get
but
the fluffy.
but it's kind of weird, right? Because you have Robert Patrick, right, who gets famous acting, right? He's the Terminator 2, right? He's the bad guy in T2, right? And then you find out that they're brothers.
Yeah,
So all of a sudden it's like they got a family.
yeah. No,
And,
I think it's
you
true.
know,
Are you okay, bud?
yeah, I got hoarse for a second.
Oh, jeez.
But yeah, so I think that like in that subgenre, right, of like music, I think Nine Inch Nails, because of Trent Reznor, goes to the top, right? And that's the thing about Ministry, right? Like Al Jorgensen is a phenomenal musician, right? But he kind of kept Ministry in that little isolation, right? Like he never really wanted to expand it. Where I think like Ministry could have taken things to that next level if they wanted to get there. It almost seems like they kind of liked that little genre that they were in and they kind of held on to it, right? They kind of took the Primus approach, right? They they have a very very unique audience because they have like loyal fans, right? Like Ministry fans are loyal to the band, but
Mhm.
they didn't really expand out on that, which is kind of like weird, right? Where like you look at Trent Reznor, he did, right? He wrote music for other people, right? He wrote songs for other artists. He wrote soundtracks. He wrote scores. I think that they all could have done that, right? You
Ooh,
guys are awesome. That is fantastic. You know,
nice.
so it's just
Yeah,
I think it's unique in the fact that they have now set up this kind of like resurgence of music because it is so easy, like we talked about last episode, to basically get a laptop out and create your own music, right?
yep.
It's very, very simple now to put some notes together and do it. And if you look at a genre that you would be able to do that with, right? Being a DJ, right, with techno or industrial is the easiest way to do it. It programs itself.
Yeah.
So it's very unique that I think that like now you have a lot of bands that have the capability of catching a second wind, riding basically the technology software because it suits their music.
I think you're right. In Hades, you have a point there too. To find the key to bring the audience back. And I think that maybe because there was the collapse in the 90s, early 2000s, that metal is a little bit cautious about it. Like, it went up and then down very quickly after that. So it's
Yeah.
like, do we want to
And you
do
know,
this? But then there's also, the mentality now is also, like our goal is to become to get the fame and glory. No, I'm kidding
right.
about
Yeah.
that. But bands do want to make it, right?
Sure.
So
And
it's I think even the most creative people are still keeping that in the back of their minds, that instead of doing something new and creative that nobody's doing right now, it's risky, right? Because it's
yeah,
like,
but
oh yeah,
it's risky.
I'll find a niche. I'll
Right.
find a niche
It's
audience. I'll
it's
pay for
it's
the 50
risky to a
people.
point though, right? Because I'm
Yeah,
gonna throw one band out there that kind of uses the industrial strategy in the metal world, and that's Slipknot, right? They use
they have a
keyboards.
lot of
They program a lot of their
yeah,
music. They
they do.
have turntables. They have a lot of the industrial components in their band. You guys are awesome. Fighting Bear, right? So, but I think that like when you have bands that push the envelope like that, if they do it in the right way, like Slipknot has, you can really be successful doing that, right? Now, I'm not saying Slipknot is an industrial band by any stretch of the imagination, but the elements are very, very similar, right? You have the same elements in Slipknot that you do in any industrial band. Those core elements are in that band. And I think that, like, if a lot of other bands do what Slipknot's doing, I think that will incorporate it. And another one, obviously, that comes to mind, which is more industrial driven, is Rammstein, right? Rammstein uses keyboards, programming, laptops, synthesizers, turntables. They have everything in that band, right? And they're very tight. And Haiti hit the nail on the head, right? Slipknot is a very, very tight band, and Rammstein are a very, very tight band, right? You don't see many mistakes from them. They always sound great. They're engineered very well. Their tours are phenomenal. They are always on point, but they have the money to do that, right? Slipknot hires the best sound engineers to put their stage together, right? Rammstein does the same thing. When they tour, they could spend $4 million on a tour and have it ultra successful, where most bands don't have that luxury. They're doing the sound themselves. They're doing the programming themselves. They're doing the lighting themselves. They're doing everything themselves. But it's just kind of like one of those things where it's like, when you look at it from a whole, those bands are industrial sounding in metal, but they can incorporate either way. And Rammstein more than Slipknot, but it's just, I would hope that down the road that it would be a very unique situation if, like, industrial bands became more prevalent. And another band too that does a lot of that too is, are you familiar with Avatar?
I am not. I have heard the name, but I haven't dug into them yet.
So they do a lot of industrial sounding stuff in metal, which is very, very unique. I really like them as a style, and their singer's phenomenal. But they use, hey, Deanne, what's going on?
Hey, Deanne.
But they are very, very, very well done as far as, like, industrial and metal goes. They have a very unique sound too. They're right on that cusp. And they're a big band, right? Like, Avatar in Europe is huge. They haven't quite caught on in the States yet, but, like, they are a very, very industrial based band.
Yeah. And another one too, that I discovered recently, but then, found out that they've been around
What's
for
up,
20
Sylvia?
years. Hey, Sylvia. Good to see you.
Diane, what's up?
But Anal Nutrock that I just found out about earlier this year. But again, I've for various reasons I was away for 20 years from the scene, but so that explains it. But they've been around for 20 years, but they are getting more and more mentions, and they are definitely. I mean, if you've heard the Forward song, by the way,
it's my favorite song,
which I know you do.
Yeah.
But that is very industrial sounding, but it sounds like industrial should in 2024 type of thing. Like, if you want to do extreme industrial music, that's what it should sound like.
Right.
Like, it's very epic, it's cinematic, it's large, and it. And when you look back and listen to Ministry from '93,
right,
it's pretty weak.
Yeah, right. It's more punky, right? It's kind of punk driven, right? It's more of a punk element than an industrial element, for sure.
And it doesn't sound fat. It doesn't sound deep. There's not.
Yeah, it's not chunky at all.
And, or whatever, right? But so I think that when these bands are doing this sort of thing, incorporating more of the electronics in a very skillful way, and especially if you have 20 years experience already, you kind of have a better feeling of what works and what doesn't, or you have enough of the I don't care.
And so there's
to just do whatever you feel like, because
and speaking of Anal Nutrock, right? There's a band called Teeth that do that well. There's another, Author and Punisher does it very well. He's a one-man band, right? Ghost Meme is another one, right? He's a one-dude show. He tours with the band, but he does all the music by himself. So Ghost Meme's another one, right? So you have had a little bit of band, right, that they're doing it. Like, Health is another one, right? They just did a collab with another metal artist. But there's a lot of, like, of those industrial style bands out there, but people just have to find them, right? You have to know like where to look to see that, right? So if you look at it from the fact of like, when you use Spotify or you use Apple Music and you type in, a band like, let's just say Anal Nakrath, right? And you see all the other bands that come up, like they're worth a listen because some of them are really, really good, right? And it's kind of the same thing too, right? When you talk about industrial music, you don't quite think of them as industrial per se, but like Korn had a lot of industrial elements in it, right? Like when Korn first came out, they were very, very electronic, right? More than they were metal, right? And so, you don't think of Korn as an industrial metal band by any stretch of the imagination, but again, the incorporation of it was definitely in there, right?
Yeah.
They had those elements, and Korn became huge, right? Like they blew up, and it's just a unique thing, right? When you look at the music world, right, and you say, why did one band become famous? Why another band just kind of got mid-range, right? And you look at it, and you're like, what? Why didn't that band make it huge, right? Like, what didn't they have? And sometimes it's by choice. We mentioned that before, right? Some bands like the smaller, intimate atmospheres, and they don't want to play stadiums. But if you want to be a mega superstar and you want to make millions of dollars, the way to do it is to go on tour, right? Tour big stadiums. Sell your $75, $80 tickets to 35,000 people, right? Like that's how you're going to get, recognized as far as like playing. Nothing wrong with staying local, but at some point it's either going to be about the money or it's going to be about the entertainment value. And if you don't care about the money, you generally stay a little bit smaller. If you care about the entertainment value, you generally start to reach out to, playing 2,000 people to 5,000 to 7,000 to 10 to 15. And then you start going on these stadium tours, whereas some bands just don't like playing for more than 1,000 people.
Yeah. And, to make that jump, it used to be always that you were on a label and the label supported you and they were the ones that could sort of up the marketing budget to get you out to a larger audience, whatever, right? But love you too.
You guys are great. Thank you so much.
But but today you can get really far on your own by if you just put in the work. Like if you're on the TikToks, you do the lives and all that stuff, right? But I think it still can only take you so far. Like you will not become a stadium performer from that alone. So the key thing is to be able to make the transition from being an independent artist that does it all themselves. And then realizing to get to the next level, I need to hire people. And I need support. I need a manager. I need a label. I need a coordinator, whatever, right? Which is an investment, and a cut of your income also goes to that.
Yeah, and that goes for everything
it's a gamble,
too,
right? And
thank you, Sylvia. You're awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. But that is also tricky, right? Because you need to pick the right label that that will actually support you well. You have to pick the right manager that will actually work for you well and that you agree with. And you have to make the right artistic choices that you don't sell out,
Braden, what's up?
And lose the foundation that took you to that point where, you need to expand, but stay true to that, just make it bigger, or whatever.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
And it's so tricky. It seems there's a definite threshold there to go from famous local to famous countrywide.
Sure. Of course. So and then again, it's one of those things
so tricky
where everything has to fall in place, right? Everything's about timing, right? You're at the right venue, at the right set, where somebody is famous that's watching you, right? Likes what you're doing and says, hey, listen, I found this band. I really think we should, check them out, right? That definitely helps. And life is all about timing, right? Meeting certain people at a certain place in time that fits for you, right? And you can do that like on any walk of life, right? But for the most part, I think a lot of these bands, that just have it, but they don't have it, right? And you look at it and it's like, what makes a certain band bigger than another band when you might like the music of the not so bigger band better, right? Like, what is it about them where they got it is, Braden said Septic Flesh, right? They're another one. They are awesome, right? They're symphonic and other, we mentioned them earlier, and they are just like an incredible band, right? Like, but that's the thing, right? About like Septic Flesh, right? Like they're one of the few bands that can incorporate industrial metal, opera, right? They play the piano and the keyboards and the organs, right? They got a very deep and dark sound to them, but they are an incredible band, right? But they're another
Yes.
one, right? You look at like some black metal bands that have made it big using the synth stuff, but then why isn't Septiflesh made it big, right? And they got a great look, right? When you look at their album covers, they all have the top hats, they wear the Victorian jackets and the ties. They kind of have that vampire, like gothic, like typo cradle look. Like they have everything. Why aren't they huge? Like why isn't Septiflesh a big one? And I believe they're from Italy, if I'm not mistaken.
Greece.
I think they're an Italian band. I
No,
could
they're
be
from
wrong, but
Greece.
I'm pretty sure Septiflesh is from Italy, right? Like they're all over. Like they have a great goth look, they have a great sound, but it's like, why don't they just have it, right? Like, why isn't Septic Flesh a huge band? I mentioned Avatar before, right? Why isn't Avatar a huge band, right? And I don't know why. I just don't know. I don't have the answer for that, right? And it's like, and
Yeah.
they should be, right?
Yeah. No, Septic Flesh, they're from Greece, by the way. They
Out
have
of
an
Greece.
Austrian drummer,
Okay.
but
I
anyway,
didn't know if they were. I thought they were Italian, but I don't know why. But from
no,
Greece.
they're from Greece. Um, but it also depends on what do you call big, right?
Right.
There's a fantastic. The full show is on YouTube. Septic Flesh with a full symphony orchestra
Sure.
in Mexico City, I think. And that's a packed, large venue. It's not arena. It's not Wembley. Like they won't fill
Right.
Wembley, but they're still big enough to be able to have people, a few thousand people standing there screaming their names, right? Um, but what I was gonna finish my last thing with is when you need the support of other people, like for example, a big budget label. Maybe the manager or the label manager that you work with
Right.
is young enough to not have experienced the industrial bubble and the crash of
Sure.
it, but the label itself
Right.
has. That manager's manager
Yeah.
remembers that industrial bit us
Yeah.
in the ass last
So
time.
So
So
back in the day, I'm dating myself now, but when Metal Blade was like in its prime, right? You had a lot of bands signing to Metal Blade. There was a label called Candlelight Records, and they had a lot of the black symphonic like industrial metal on that, right? It was a very unique record label. It was called Candlelight Records, and they had a lot of that like gothic style music, which was awesome. But that label never caught on, right? They were always secondary to like Metal Blade and Roadrunner, and like you had all these other ones, and it was like maybe you mentioned, right? Maybe they just didn't have the management or the buying power or the touring power. But like Candlelight had some of the best artists on it at the time, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Grave signed to them at some point. The band Grave, I don't know if you've ever heard of them. They were kind of like a more of a
British.
gothy, right? Grave signed to them, and I think um what's the other one that they did a split album together. It was Grave and another band that were pretty big. It's like right on the tip of my tongue, and it'll come to me when I realize what it is. But they were like a really big band, and like they were on that, and they never really just kind of made it, right. And there were a lot of great bands on Candlelight that really just kind of went to the wayside, but were awesome artists, right? Like that were very, very good.
Yeah,
So
it's an unfortunate music industry thing too, right? If you focus only on the artistry and not the business side, like these are great
yeah,
artists. We invest in that. Let's focus on the artistry. Unfortunately, the artistry only takes you so far. Like you have to do the
yeah.
other stuff
Type
too, which
typo
feels like a little bit of a sellout, but typo negative. So yeah,
Yeah.
Hades.
Ty- Typo Negative, I think, and another band I'm going to throw out there that used to be one of my favorite bands, and they just didn't get famous either, was a band called Carnal Forge. They had a very, very heavy, like industrial kind of like symphonic thing going, and they never got the recognition they deserved, right? They just never caught on, right? And Carnal Forge was great. And there's a lot of them, right? There's a lot of bands that are out there, and another one too, right? Is I think somebody mentioned it earlier, right? Like Dimmu, like you can incorporate a lot of what Dimmu Borgir did, right? From black metal to symphonic to industrial, right? Like Demu had it all, right? Like they were one of the few that actually did it. Cradle never really went into the industrial side of things. They kind of stayed more symphonic. They took like black metal at its core, and like we said last week, they had studio time, right? They actually went into the studio and recorded it and made it sound good, where they weren't just doing it on tape and trekking it. Like they actually went to a studio and laid down their tracks, right? But like Demu kind of went into that industrial scene for a little bit, right? So I know somebody said it earlier, the parenthetic euphorication, right? Their album there, that was awesome, right? Like they did a lot of other stuff, right? Yeah, Death Cult Armageddon is definitely right. So, Demu, their earlier stuff, yes, was just straight black metal, right? But their later stuff now is really like focused more on symphonic and industrial side of things, right? And I know we mentioned it before. I don't know if you've ever heard, I think I mentioned it like in a feud podcast ago, but there was a band called Emperor, right? Emperor was a black metal band, right?
Mhm.
They kind of split, they did their own thing. Well, the bassist and guitarist from Emperor went and did his own thing, right? He did the Evil Elf thing. I tell you that he had an album called Parasite God, which was awesome, right? And I don't remember what his band is called. I'm gonna have to look it up because it's driving me crazy. That it's right on the tip of my tongue. But he basically started an industrial band from Emperor, right? And they were really really good. And it's killing me that I can't think of the name of it, and it's right like on the tip of my tongue. But he was the bassist from Emperor, and that was it. So Sylvia, take care. Have a good night.
Yeah, thank you so much. I have while you're looking it up, I have a little bit of uh, a connection to Emperor. I,
Yeah,
did I tell you I ran across the guy that designed their logo?
Mortis. Mortis is the name of the band.
Oh, Mortis. Yes,
Yeah,
I've heard of
and
Mortis.
and so that's the evil elf. Like he does it. He dresses like an elf, but he was an emperor. That's how he started. He was the bass player for Emperor. Mortis was.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, no, I ran across the guy that made the Emperor logo back in the day, and
Oh, really?
yeah. So he's made the logo for my solo project too. So I'll have a Christoph Speidel logo. It's
Nice.
pretty cool.
But I can't wait to see that. That's awesome,
Yeah,
right?
we'll
And
see what.
Emperor back in the day had the coolest, like one of the coolest logos, right? That E with the M and the
Yeah,
P, and then the OR, where the R was big, and then the ER. Like they had a really, really unique logo for black metal.
yeah,
They were like in the forefront of cool logos long
yeah.
before like Cradle ever came out with theirs. And remember Demu's old logo was like that DIMMU, and then it was like squashed in like a little like square
Very,
rectangle thing. It looked, but Emperor was
very
always
cool.
had awesome. Their logo was great. Their album covers were great.
Yeah,
Emperor always had great logos.
yeah. But so Hades mentioned Type O Negative. I don't think that I would classify the, Type O Negative. I mean, I love them. I saw them in '95. They're one of the best shows I've ever seen. Peter Steele
Covenant, very
was
good.
hilarious. Um, but I want to classify them as industrial. Yes, they use
Yeah.
synths or whatever, right? But that's for the atmosphere. It's perfect
Right.
for their sound
Yeah.
and everything. But I wouldn't call
So
it industrial.
Braden
But I
mentioned.
think that one movement that happened was some of the EBM, like more like purely electronic artists started to pick up guitars. Like Combi
Yeah.
Christ did that, for example. I
Yeah.
saw them in Berwyn just a few months ago. By the way, they were awesome. Nitzreb started to do more actual guitar rather than just
Mhm.
sampling them. I think, and not live, but they're still just too live or whatever. But I think that that's something that tended to happen as well. That it's been more that
So the
um, It used to be that electronic bands embraced
yeah,
heavy guitars back in the earlier days more,
sure.
and now it is starting that metal
Peace. What's
bands
going on?
metal
Yeah.
bands
So
yeah
yeah.
metal
So
bands just used to have electronics as a cool little breakdown here and there, like a
right.
little bit of a surprise, a little bit of a background thing. But I think that is moving more and more towards bringing that to the forefront. So I think that there's a lot left to be done with electronics and metal.
Yeah, and so like you just hit it
Exciting.
right. You just hit the nail on the head, right? Industrial music with bringing actual elements of real music into it, right? Like guitar riffs, drums, actual bass instead of just on a programming, right? I think the sound is better, and I think a lot of bands are getting into that, right? And so I always said it, and I think I said it a few weeks ago, right? The first time I saw Ministry, they had a band open up for them called Hansel and Gretel. And I think I saw Ministry in 2002 or 2003. So this is going back now almost 30 years, right? This is not new. It's not like the 2010 or 2015 or even 2020 Ministry. This is going back. And these guys, there was two guys and two girls. And they had kind of like a military like bomber style look to them, right? They wore the aviation glasses and the leather helmets, but they rocked the place, right? And they shocked everybody, right? Like when Hansel and Gretel were done playing, people were like going to their merch booth and buying their CDs. I mean, they sold out of everything. And they like, I don't want to say they were better than Ministry, but that night they gave Ministry a run for their money. They were awesome. And that place was like I think everybody that went to see Ministry that night left a Hansel and Gretel fan. They were awesome. They rocked it that night. And I was a huge fan, and I became a fan, right? And the thing was is that they were very big in Europe. They were big in Germany. They were big in Sweden. They were big in Denmark and Norway and all these other places. So trying to find their album in the US was near impossible unless you went to the shows to see them, right? And they never toured the US, I don't think, much after that, which is kind of disappointing because I think the majority of them now lived in the US. I think they became California people, right? They moved from Europe over here. But I don't know, like they're just another band that could have been just one of the biggest bands in the world. I think they just had a great sound, a great look, and they had two females in the band, which is very rare, right? You know, most of the time you get a female, or like they're not like there was a female vocalist and a male vocalist, so they both sang. One played guitar, one played bass, and it was like incredible. They were just awesome, and they became and still are one of my favorite bands.
And you never know why, right? Because like I said before,
Yeah,
right? You have to find the right people that click all together. They're on the same page. Because it could be like U.S. manager that they ran into was an asshole,
yeah,
or it could be that
right. You never
the
know.
label says no, you need to change up your costume because we can't market that in the
Sure.
U.S. whatever, right? And they say no way, or whatever, or you never know, right?
You
So
never
it
know,
could be
right? There's
a lot
no
of variables.
there's no rhyme or reason. And in another band too, right? That doesn't get the credit they deserve is American Head Charge, right? Like I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they are like they started off as like a super heavy metal band, then they went industrial, then they kind of went to this like weird kind of like industrial metal. Like it was better than Fear Factory, in my opinion. But they never caught on. American Head Charge was a great band. And they put out like one album, and they didn't put another one out for like another decade, right? It was a very weird thing. And that was the era where they did that, right? Union Underground's another one, right? The Union Underground is like underrated in terms of like metal and industrial rock. I think like they are another one that could have been huge, and they just never made it. And again, I think the Union Underground, they became, I think, most famous because they wrote the theme song for Monday Night Raw during the Attitude Era. When you heard when wrestling opened, that was the Union Underground. That was their song. So when you watch Monday Night Raw, all through the Attitude Era with The Rock and Stone Cold and Triple H and DX and all those guys, Union Underground wrote the theme song to that. So when Monday Night Raw opened, that was the Union Underground. They were awesome. They were really. Are you familiar with them at all? The Union Underground?
No, not at all.
You should
And
be.
I'm not
They
a
are.
racing guy either, so I wouldn't know
Yeah.
the theme song either.
Well, I knew them before wrestling, but when they wrote the song to the theme song, they kind of blew up because everybody was like, "Who is this band?" And it was the Union Underground. And they have one of their greatest songs, the South Texas Death Ride. It's a great song.
I'll have to look them up. Yeah. I have to rewatch this unless I can get you to send these names that you're mentioning because it all
Yeah,
sounds really interesting for me to look up. It really um yeah, just go. Oh, strapping young
right.
lad. Hey,
Yeah,
hey. I used to do a fanzine back in Sweden, like in the
uh huh,
mid 90s. Um, we were on the basement level, right? We had editions of
right.
800 photocopied magazines, right? But there was a good, actually printed professional magazine called Close Up, and they had compilation CDs, and one of them was the first song by a strapping young lad, and I need to find that song title, but it was very industrial, one of the best industrial songs
So
I've
so
ever
that's
heard.
that's another question, right? So
They're not
you
great
look at
anymore, I don't think, but
you look at Strapping Young Lad, right? And all the amazing guitar work Devin Townsend has done, right? Like the guy's a virtuoso, right? And you look at Children of Bodom, right? And you look at all the industrial elements that Children of Bodom has in there, right? And Alexi Lavlo playing an amazing guitar. Those are two musicians that always get overlooked when you say best guitarist or most influential guitarist. Those two never make the list, and they definitely should. And I've always said about Devin Townsend, why he
Devin
doesn't
does
make
now. I see his
more.
name all over the place right now,
Right.
actually.
Like I never really see him mentioned in like, when you look at like the top 10 metal guitarist, right? He's never on that list. And I'm not saying he should be number one, but he's definitely top 10. And Alexi Laho is the same way, right? Children of Bodom was awesome, right? Like they were fantastic. And they just don't really ever seem to get the credit they deserve, right? They never really found their place in the music scene, but like they were fantastic. And the first time I saw them, they opened for Cradle of Filth. It was God Forbid, Children of Bodom, and Cradle, where that was the three bands, and that's how God Forbid won me over, right? And God Forbid has nothing to do with industrial music at all. They're super chunky, like they're like Killswitch Engage on steroids. But God Forbid was fantastic, right? And they opened up for Children of Bodom, who opened for Cradle, and I
Yeah.
saw them at the House of Blues in Chicago. It was 2006, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that Devin is getting his credit now, maybe because he's been so consistent over so many years that he's starting to get that credit of his guitar playing, and actually he's starting to get recognized for being a good singer too.
Right.
But but the guitar playing is what's getting him up the ranks now, like
Yeah. Right. And
top tier considered metal guitarist. So that's good that he's getting there.
it's good to see, right, that they're getting like the credit where credit's due, right? Just because there are a lot of good bands out there that, like, obviously if you're a fan of certain music, you'll know who they are. But there are a lot of bands that like I said, just kind of just don't go noticed, right? And it's not to say that they're not talented musicians or they don't have their place, but it's just hard when you have like these certain bands that like everybody knows, right? And we mentioned it at the beginning, at the top of the hour, right? If you were to say industrial bands, right, I think everybody without a question would say Nine Inch Nails, right? If they don't know any other industrial band, most people will associate that with Nine Inch Nails, right? And when you look at what Nine Inch Nails did at the beginning versus where they're at now, right? They incorporate more instruments than they do programming, where I think Pretty Hate Machine was written by Trent Reznor. He was the only musician on it. He played all the music. He did the synths. He did the programming. He did the keyboards. He did everything as a one-man band and put that album out, right? And Pretty Hate Machine is awesome. Like that's my favorite Nine Inch Nail record. But you look at him now, like he's gotten far away from that, right? He's got a full touring band now. He still does the music, but it's not as industrial based, right? It's more of a rock band now as opposed to industrial, where it's just, and I'm not saying it's a one-man band that you need to be industrial to do that, but like that sound that he created initially is far from where he's at now.
Yeah, which is great. But I was gonna say too that early Ministry, right? Like the Mind is the Terrible Thing to Taste album and whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like especially the drumming is,
Yeah.
and even the guitar work is something that you could only do if you sampled.
Right. Sure.
Like
Yeah.
nobody could play kick drums like that unless it was from a drum machine. Like it was impossible with
Right.
it. But now drummers are both better, and the technology is there too, that you can move your feet that fast, so you don't really necessarily need the drum machines anymore.
Now,
you don't need the sampler so much to be able to play the way that it sounded that you had to sequence back in the day. People got so good at it that they could actually make
absolutely
sounds
right.
with,
And I
with
think
the actual band. So that might be another reason why once Meshuggah Bleed comes out, right?
All right, like, Haiti, take care, buddy.
That's
right.
Hades, thanks.
Yeah, and so like you just mentioned
that was like superhuman abilities. It's like you can actually do that on drums now, and I've said it before, but you can go into Guitar Center now, just wait a few hours, and there'll be an 8-year-old kid coming in and playing Bleed on the drums, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that might be another reason why that it was like electronics could do what
Right.
actual
But
people
but
could not
anybody
do.
who puts drum programming with double bass kicks has to tip their hat to Ray Herrera of Fear Factory because he was the first one to do it. When Digimortal came out, everybody was like, "Why is Raymond Herrera's drumming sound like that?" And he said, "Because I use double bass kicks and I program my music." He's like, "I
Yeah.
use," and it wasn't a drum machine. He programmed the music to the double bass, so he had the most unique sound in all of metal when he drummed. You knew it was Raymond Herrera on the
Yeah.
drums. So even before Dino's guitars ever kicked in, when you heard Fear Factory drumming, you knew that was Ray Herrera, and he doesn't get the credit he deserves as a metal drummer, right? Because he was way ahead of his time in terms. Pete Sandoval, right? He's another one. Morbid
It's
Angel is,
yeah.
is off awesome, right? Like, I mean, Morbid Angel is probably, in terms of like death metal, right? They're the kings. They have to be, right, the godfathers of.
He's better. He was better in Terrorizer. No,
He was good in
no.
Terrorizer. I'll give you that, right?
Sorry.
Terrorizer was great, right? He was
Right.
awesome, but that's the thing, right? Like you look at like a lot of bands that have good metal drummers, right? Like we mentioned Demu before, right? They had Toljoff, and then they had Nicholas Barker, right? Nicholas Barker is a fantastic drummer, right? He doesn't get the mad props he deserves, right? Toljoff, he left Demu and went to Suspiria, right? You talk about a gothic metal industrial band. Suspiria is fantastic. If you've never heard of Suspiria before, they are incredible. Suspiria brings it. They are very, very heavy. I got to see them at the Milwaukee Metal Fest, and
Yeah.
that's Toljoff from Demu, right? And he changed his entire style to play more of a gothic, industrial type drum than just the blast beats that he used to hit in Demu, right? So he's a very underrated drummer, right? There's a lot of them, right? Like there are, like, Tim Young is a very underrated drummer, right? Like he's a fantastic drummer. He's great, right? Frost, right? Hellhammer, all these guys are great, right? Like Hellhammer was a fantastic drummer, right? He's played in every black metal band you could possibly think of, and he's fantastic, right? It's just that
Yeah.
there are a lot of good people that just go under the radar because when you look at it, right, like not everybody's Dave Lombardo. Let's face it, right? Like he's probably the icon of metal drumming, right? But there are a lot of good drummers out there that could rival him, but just on not that grand of a stage, right? So
Yeah, I've said it before and I'll say it again. The first person to do things isn't necessarily the best one, but they set the stage for everybody else to
right,
follow, and then it becomes a competition after that. So Dave Lombardo, I mean, he probably he made a similar decision. I think that what you were saying about the Demu drummer, which is like, I've done the Slayer thing. I'm gonna go play Fantomas now. I'm
yeah,
gonna do some weird
right,
shit,
yeah,
because that seems like more fun.
you know.
You know,
And that's the thing, right? Like Dave Lombardo comes off the set of Slayer, right? Again, I'm not knocking Paul Bostaph at all, right? And his drumming ability is great, right? But when you have Dave Lombardo, who sets the bar, right, as far as like modern metal drumming, right, there are very few people that you can put in that same category as Dave Lombardo, right, that has multitude of successful bands, right? Because most drummers, if they leave a band and they go to another band, it might not be as recognizable or as big as their initial band, right? So
mhm.
another one to do it that was in also some very successful bands after he left is Vinnie Paul, right? He left Pantera, he goes to Damage Plan, he goes to Hell Yeah, right? Like he has three different styles of drumming and he adapted to his style for the band that he was in. And it's hard to do when you're used to playing the groove style of Pantera because that is very hard to keep up with, right? Dimebag's playing, you have to have speed and agility to play with Dime, right? And Vinny had it, but he also was able to slow it down with Hell Yeah, right? Because he can't drum to the same beat as Dime when you're in a band where the guitarist is nowhere as near as good as Dime is, right? So he
Right.
adjusted his drumming style to the bands that he was in, and it's not easy to do. And he always gets kind of passed up in the metal world of drumming, right? Like so, it's just kind of it's a and again it's an opinion, but I don't know in terms of like a drummer who can play in many other bands. Another one that comes to mind right off the top of my head is like Mike Portnoy, right? Played in
Mhm.
Dream Theater, played in Avenged Sevenfold. He's been in like every major metal band that you can think of. He's done some stuff with Mark Morton of Lamb of God, right? He was drummed on his album, his solo album, right? That's a pretty amazing thing to do, right? To go from band to band to band and be that good all over the place, right? And there are probably hundreds of other drummers that even aren't even on this list that could have done the same thing, right? And I know you're not a big fan of the band, but give credit where credit due. Danny Carey is a very good drummer from Tool. He's played in punk bands, he's played in metal bands, he's played in all different sorts of stuff. And I know you're not a fan of Tool per se, but his drumming is amazing, right? And whether you like Tool or not, he's been a drummer in 4 other bands that have all been great.
Yeah. No, I do not want to discount their musicianship. I'm just not a huge fan of the music.
Right, sure.
Maybe it's a tool, a douche tool.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a different discussion. Yeah, I think we can throw in Gene Hoglan in the discussion.
Sure, of course, right? He's another one, right?
But like you said, there are hundreds of them. And there's a lot of inbreeding going on.
And Gene Hoglan, surprisingly enough, he's actually done some stuff in industrial bands too. So he's kind of got that presence to him and that aura where he can bounce around from band to band to band, right, and kind of make everybody in it sound good, right? And I think if I'm not if I'm not mistaken, right, wasn't Dave Lombardo in Gripping too? Didn't he play drums in that?
I am not sure.
I think he might have. Because that was another band that
But Lombardo's not loud about it, right?
Right.
Lombardo just plays.
No, he's under the radar. He is very low key when he does stuff that is not Slayer, right?
Yeah. No. Which is to his credit.
Right, and being able to drum in Suicidal, right, to be their drummer, to play in Suicidal Tendencies, to play in the Misfits, to play in Slayer, Phantomus, Tomahawk, like all these other bands that he's been a part of it's incredible. Like his musicianship is unparalleled.
Insane. But yeah. No, it's all impressive, and if we go back to the industrial thing too, the people that like Trent, you said Trent Reznor could go from genre to genre almost, but he always using the Nine Inch Nails moniker or doing the cinematic stuff or whatever. I think that is a sign of a true creative person and being fearless about it. And I totally also think that Trent Reznor with Nine Inch Nails, he probably got tired of it a little bit and got tired of the expectations and pressure, to do the stuff. And I know that he had record label disputes and all that stuff going on too.
But I think that's why he did
and all kinds of things. So that might have been why he was like not quite in it,
But he was very lucky though, because he was able to outlet that in scores, right? Because he's done scores for 3 movies, and wrote songs for movies. So
more than that,
For him, I think that was a really good outlet for him to do that, right? To go to Hollywood to say, listen, use my talents as a songwriter and music maker and sound effect guy to use that to his advantage, where most other artists would not be able to do that, right? They can't come out of a band and go and do that. And he was able to transition very, very well into doing that. And again, you got to give credit where credit's due, because the guy's an incredible musician. So whether or not you like him, I know a lot of people have their opinion about Trent Reznor, but like he is fantastic, right? And I know he wrote Wanted. I don't know if you've seen the movie Wanted with the Hitmen, but with Angelina Jolie, like he wrote the score to Wanted. That was his song in it, and so the guy's just incredible. He's a very talented human being, right? Like just not a musician, but he's very well rounded in what he can do.
No, and I just saw a quote that he's done a number of soundtracks. I think that it's definitely more than 3. I think he might have won 2 Oscars.
Right.
But he's doing the next Tron movie, right?
Yeah.
But he's doing that as Nine Inch Nails and not as Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross. And the first review of the music that I saw was like, it's grittier than usual.
Sure. Yeah.
Awesome. And it fits the Tron movie perfectly.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
I'm so excited to see what that is, because one of the things that inspires me with the music that I'm trying to do is I try to do movie score-ish. Like I like the big drums, percussion, and dramatic pulses and that sort of thing. Like I try to put that into my music too. That would be a good benchmark of where it can go, probably. You know,
Sure.
imagine Hans Zimmer going industrial type of thing.
Yeah,
That's
right, exactly.
what I'm expecting, right? I mean, Hans Zimmer is already kind of sort of industrial.
Yeah,
Like
a
he's
little bit,
not
right?
afraid to use
He's
distorted guitars and all that shit. You wouldn't think so by looking at him, but the
right.
dude's pretty badass. He writes
And
some hit stuff.
and surprisingly enough, who flows under the radar too with some really epic scores and movies that he kind of only gets the credit for, like Halloween, is John Carpenter. Has
Oh
done
my
some
god.
amazing stuff, and he doesn't get the credit that he deserves. Like he always, like he is a fantastic musician. If you put John Carpenter his music with any metal or rock band, he'd fit right in. Like his stuff is
Mhm.
very very good, but he never gets the credit that he deserves. Like as a musician, I don't know. I just feel bad for him almost.
Yeah, I've never told anyone this, but I have this dream of, I have an idea for Escape from Las Vegas. I
Right.
have a movie idea for that. And to work with John Carpenter to write the
Right.
music for it too. Like that would be like
Yeah.
then I can die very
Right.
comfortably.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, because he's a great musician too, right? In his own right, and
Yeah,
he comes up with
love his
great
stuff.
sounds and great scores and great lyrics, and he just doesn't really get the credit that he
Yeah.
deserves. I don't feel, anyways.
And there's an artist that is really good. So when I did come back and started to find like industrial metal type of stuff, a lot of instrumental stuff came up,
Yeah.
right? It was called dark clubbing, I think the
Mhm.
genre, not industrial.
Yeah.
But one of the bands was Carpenter Brute.
Carpenter
So
Brute was another one, right? Yeah.
so that's totally a tribute to John Carpenter.
Yeah.
Like,
That there, and there are a lot of bands besides Carpenter Brute that are in that genre, right? And a lot of good ones that create
yeah,
music like that have that kind of soundtracky feel to it with no vocals, right? That they just
yeah.
play the music and they don't do anything, right? And so,
And
it's
the music is interesting enough that they don't necessarily
right.
need the vocals. Like it's still interesting to listen to, but that's also a very narrow audience to get to.
Yeah.
Like like, oh, no vocals, then you've lost all the metal people all of a
Right.
sudden, right? Um, no matter how killer hard it is.
Yeah.
But Limbo Slice, Smash
Right.
Stereo, No
Yeah.
Way, there's a whole bunch of
Right, because
awesome bands.
I was just thinking like Perpetrator's another one, right? They
Invader,
do
yeah,
the same thing, right? They do it a little bit more heavy though, right? Like they're more metally sounding than that. But like, yeah, I mean, if you took Carpenter Brute's songs, you could score them to any horror movie that you wanted to,
yeah,
right? Or any 80s action movie, right? Like that thriller type sound, like, Escape from LA kind of deal, Big Trouble Little China. Like they have that kind of ambiance to them.
yeah, yeah. And his song titles are very very much
Yeah,
movie titles, like a job for a cowboy,
right.
or that sort of thing, right? So that's awesome.
Yeah, so let's do this. Obviously, I'm pretty sure you're gonna say Ministry, right? But like, who's your favorite industrial band? If you were
Yeah,
gonna,
Ministry for sure. But they're limited to 2 or 3 albums type of thing too. It's very even because I mean, again, and it's boring to say Nine Inch Nails Downward Spiral, but it is,
yeah,
objectively speaking, to me at least, it's close to a perfect album.
sure,
But I also don't like everything Nine Inch Nails have done. There are some smaller bands that have done some amazing things. I mean, Godflesh, obviously, they're not
yeah,
especially small, but they're very consistent. And it's always good.
yeah,
I have a hard time saying what's my number one favorite, but Ministry is one of those where it's like that
sure,
was kind of a life-changing record to hear.
yeah,
It inspired me in so many different ways in my own music making. So and hearing that they're going to retire, I'm so excited about. I'm going to hang on the lock. I'm going to be, calling the hotline
sure, right?
as we did in the old days. You
Yeah,
have to get in line at
yeah, yeah.
Ticketmaster 5 hours before they open it up.
4.99 for a song to play on TV at 2 in the morning.
But yeah, so I'm going to do the equivalent to try to get any tickets as soon as it's announced that they're going to play in town next. But yeah. No, there's so many. Mel Havoc from Canada were really awesome too. So yeah, I it depends on the day. You know,
Yeah.
one day it's Godflesh, one day it's Ministry, another it's
Yeah.
whatever the record you put on is the greatest because it's
Yeah.
just so awesome when you hear it. But industrial metal definitely sort of tickles my bones in a different way
Sure.
than many
Yeah.
other types of music because I like the synthesizers. I
Yeah.
like the synthetic mixed with the organic type of thing.
Yeah.
In a very heavy, aggressive way. It's really exciting and often unexpected, and
Right.
that's a huge thrill for me.
Yeah.
How about you? Do you have a favorite?
So obviously, like my obvious answer is Hansel and Gretel, right? Like I've been a fan for them since 2003 when I saw them with Ministry, right? So that's been a while. But an album that really kind of is near and dear to me, and they're not per se industrial in terms of like industrial as we know. But did I tell you the story about my buddy from high school when we traded CDs? I traded him the Marilyn Manson CD, and he gave me the VNV Nation, and I didn't know
No.
who VNV Nation was. So I had Smells Like Children, right, when it came out. I think that was 94, 95. I think we were freshmen in high school, 96, somewhere in there, right? And that was a big one, right? Like Marilyn Manson was like kind of like the ooh, this is like, not to have. It was like the Ozzy of the 80s, right? Like that's the album that like parents didn't
Yes.
want their kids to have. You couldn't buy it. It was NC-17. You had to jump through hoops to get that album, right? Like a lot of record companies were pulling it off the shelves and they wouldn't sell it, and then you had the Columbine thing I think happened in 96 where they were basically saying like Marilyn Manson's music was the mindset that these kids were in and it influenced them to go and shoot up school, right? So it was a huge controversy with Marilyn Manson. But anyways, I was able to get that album, right? And I had it. And like you said before, tape trading, right, was a big thing, right? Well, CD trading was a big thing, right? Like you'd buy an album and you'd share it with everybody else. And this is long before you could burn CDs, right? Like, so if I bought an album, my friend bought an album, and the five of us went to Rolling Stones or went to CD Exchange, right? One person would buy an album, they'd take it home and listen to it, and then the next day you'd switch. You'd give it the album to get the next one. So you could listen to five different albums in the entire week, right? Everybody had the album for a day. Well, my buddy was a big like industrial kind of like EDM at the time. DJs were very, very popular. At that point, there was a lot of like techno music was really big in that mid '90s era. So he had this VNV Nation album. I didn't know what it was. I'm like, I'll give it a shot, right? So he's like, if you like Marilyn Manson, you're gonna like VNV Nation. I was like, okay, I kind of dig the Smells Like Children album, right? Like everybody else did. It was kind of the introduction into that kind of like goth emo type of weird type of music, right? Where they really did something unique that a lot of other bands had never really touched on, right? So I just had the VNV Nation and I remember listening to it and I didn't like it at first. I'm like, this is weird. And it grew on me, right? I kept listening to it and I'm like, and that album really was like very influential in like in terms of like, at least for me with industrial, because I didn't know what it was, right? I did not know what the music was. I did not know really anything about synthesizers and uh, going over on and obviously, right, I listened to Depeche Mode like everybody else did, right? And they were a little bit different when they used like the synth pop stuff. This was heavier synth, right? And VNV Nation opened my eyes to a lot of that. So I give my buddy credit because he turned me on to that kind of style of music where I didn't really know that stuff existed before that. And so VNV Nation is kind of like my oldest memory of industrial music. And that was 95. I think I was a sophomore in high school. So,
Yeah.
so VNV Nation holds that for the introduction to industrial. Obviously, Smells Like Children could be argued as industrial with Manson. But obviously, when I saw Hansel and Gretel for the first time, that was kind of my big like introduction into like industrial music. And Ministry was great too, right? Like when Ministry played, they rocked the place. The House of Blues, I think, had like 2,000 people in it or something like that. It was like packed for the House of Blues downtown. But Hansel and Gretel took the show that night. Like they brought it. And so I've always been a fan of that. I bought their album that night, like the CD. I think I spent $15 for it. It was live at the show, which I probably could have gotten it anywhere for $7 or $8. But I was like, well, I'm here and I'm going to get it. So I bought the CD and I spent the money on it, and it was awesome. Like it was fantastic. So Hansel and Gretel is kind of like my, by default, if I hadn't gone to see Ministry, I wouldn't have ever known them. So like I thank Ministry for doing that, right? Because they introduced me to one of my favorite industrial bands, which is Hansel and Gretel.
Never miss the opening bands.
Never.
That's a life lesson. But yeah, no, yeah, I think we're getting to that time to wrap it up. But
Sure.
I think that what we've agreed on is that industrial metal was really awesome. I think it
For
had a
sure.
premature death. I think that it still has a
Aaron
lot of
Gray,
life
very good.
left. I think it has a lot of life left in it. I think that there's a lot of uncovered ground,
Yeah.
and me and hopefully others will try to explore that and
Sure.
see
So I
where we
have
can
an
go.
idea for next week's episode. When you mentioned it earlier,
Sure.
maybe we should talk about like band management, right? And how important it is to really have a good manager and somebody who's into you, right? Not a manager that has 8 or 9 other bands and you hop on with him, but like a manager that really goes out of his way or her way for you, right?
Yeah.
A band. And I know I joke about it a lot too, but there was a really funny show called Z Rock. I don't know if you've ever seen it. The
No.
band is ZO2. They're a real band, but they were a kids band by day. They would sing like birthday parties and bar mitzvahs and stuff like that. And they were a rock band by night. But it was really cool because their manager like had so much faith in them that they were going to become big and famous and tour with Kiss and all these other bands, right? But it was just a really cool show. It was fun, but it kind of showed the behind the scenes of how important a manager in a band really is, booking shows, producing their music, giving their records out, because she was basically like, she would do anything for the band, right? And it was just kind of a really cool show. But I think we should touch on that subject, basically,
Yeah.
the fact that like, we should probably talk about like the business side of music for once, and talk about production and management and touring and things like that, that like kind of is the underbelly of the music business, right? Because it's what
Yeah.
makes every band a band, right? Without it, they don't have it. But I think we can kind of do that for for an episode. We can kind of talk about the business end of music as opposed to
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. We have the Flight of the Concords guy.
right. Yeah, right,
There's a failure in management,
right,
but someone who's fully dedicated, just not good at it.
right.
Or then we have the guy with the cricket bat,
Yeah, right.
for Spinal Tap. Anyway, yeah, no, that sounds like a good thing.
Cool.
Awesome. Let's do it.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. We're just two guys that like music and life and talking about it. So thank you guys for all the gifts, for all the love and support. It means the world to us. We will be back next Thursday night. I know we had some issues, me personally, tomorrow. I had a meeting that I had to make. So I asked Kelly if we could do this tonight. So he obliged and said yes. But I think we'll come live next Thursday night at 7:30 at our normal time. And the topic we have discussed for right now is business and management and music, but I'm sure we'll come up with something else in the next week.
Actually, next week, probably not on Thursday because that's Thanksgiving, right?
I don't, is it? Yeah, it is.
I think so.
You want to do Black Wednesday or maybe Tuesday?
Yeah, so we probably won't do Thursday next week. I'm guessing that we have
Want to try
Thanksgiving
Tuesday
plans.
then?
Yeah, let's do it.
Because Wednesday is a big drinking night, right? Because nobody works on
Well,
Thursday.
of course it is. and, we, and we'd get a big restriction if we did that on
So,
screen here.
so maybe we'll do Tuesday then, if that's okay.
Yeah, that sounds good. Or a very tired Friday.
Yeah. Either way, I'm good with either one. So let's shoot for Tuesday and we'll see how we feel. If that doesn't work, we'll plan something else out.
I have all week off next week, so I'll
Awesome.
be
Well, good for
available at
you.
all
I'm
times.
jealous because I don't. So yeah, well, we'll definitely plan it then. We'll shoot for Tuesday at 7:30, and if something comes up or that doesn't work for either one of us, we'll figure something out. But
Sounds
either
great.
way, thank you guys again for the love and support. It really means the world to us. Thank you guys for all the gifts, right? I know Sylvia, Ellie, Kim, Shannon, Esther, you guys don't have to do that. We love it and we appreciate it, but you really don't. And so thank you for all of that, right? We love you guys. You guys are our rock and our foundation, right? And supporting the show and supporting us means the world to us. So thank you for that. We we appreciate it beyond words. So thank you guys again for joining us. If you follow me and you don't follow Kelly, please do that. He deserves all the credit in the world for doing this, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be sitting here. So I thank him every time we do this. So please follow him, subscribe to all his stuff. He's got some really great content that he puts out and much better than mine. So follow him. He's definitely worth it.
it's different than yours. Your content, the way you do it, is much better than I ever could. So yeah, and same thing. I can't see a list of who's on, but if it's anyone that's one of my regulars, follow Mark One Fun Guy podcast for
awesome.
sure. Interesting interviews and all that stuff. It's great stuff.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. We appreciate it. We'll see you next week, and we'll aim for Tuesday. We'll see what comes up, and we'll catch everybody then. Have a great, safe weekend, everybody, and we'll catch you next week.